Hi, I'm Sharon, and I'm glad to be back with you. And you know that my purpose for writing these stories is to bring you a smile or two in these difficult times. Every story I write is based on the truth, including this one, and the event actually did happen. Now, you know I exaggerate the humor because that's me. Please write me a message or send me an emoji so I know who's listening in my audience. It helps me write my stories. Besides Beauregard and Bessie May today and Marilyn Pressman, the boss's daughter, and Granger, who has a crush on her, I'm also introducing Lydia Forrester, who is a very wealthy wife of a Forrester Oil Company man. They live in western Texas, where we lived, as well as we lived all over in Texas when we first got out of mortuary college. Now, death is never funny, but morticians, well, they're a whole different bag of snakes. Some of them, just like me, are more than a little quirky. The characters I've developed are from family members, associates, co-workers, and friends. Now to the story. Bessie May and Mary Lynn were enjoying a cup of coffee after a hectic morning in the preparation room and arranging flowers in the stateroom. The latest funeral home acquisition, Ash Grove, was a small mortuary that Fallon had bought to oust his competition and, of course, was a very good place to hide Beauregard. After Beauregard was given a hiatus from work there without pay to collect his wits because of his recent string of screw-ups. Beauregard kept a low profile there for, almost 3 weeks. Granger popped his head in the Dallas lounge. Fallon wants to see the three of us. Bessie May rapped on Fallon's open door with Mary Lynn and Granger close behind. Fallon never raised his eyes from the notes on his desk. Beauregard called. He has an infant death call, a removal. I'm sending you, Bessie May, because, quite frankly, someone needs to keep Beauregard in line. Bessie May rolled her eyes. Fallon kept reading. This woman is Lydia Forster of the Forster Oil Company. This is important. This removal is done right and impressively right. I'm sending you, Granger and Mary Lynn, because you've never been on an infant home removal. And it will be a good learning experience. Plus, it's important to emphasize to the family how much we value their business. Her estate is in a gated community, but I've told Beauregard to wait outside for you because I want you to take the brand new Cadillac hearse inside the gates for the removal. After all, it will be important to make a good impression on her neighbors. Fallon didn't see Bessie May's knitted eyebrows. Beauregard said he already has the bassinet for the baby. Just as Fallon instructed, the three met Beauregard at the gated entrance to the mansion. The guard motioned them in. Mrs. Forster is expecting you. Remember, Beauregard said, this is my removal. I'll do the talking. I don't even know why Fallon sent you three. Mrs. Forster even said I probably should bring someone to help lift her baby. She knows nothing about funeral business. He gave the bassinet to Granger to carry so that his appearance at the door would be more dignified. After all, Fallon was right. Appearance with these people was everything, so he was the perfect guy to do it. A housekeeper answered the door. "Please come in, wait here, and I'll tell Mrs. Forrester that you're waiting." A few minutes later, Mrs. Forrester walked down the grand stairs to the entryway. Her eyes were red, and she carried a tissue in her hand. "Baby is upstairs in the second bedroom on the right." Her voice broke. "I'm Beauregard P. Wienerman, manager of Ash Grove Funeral Home, and these are my 3 assistants." He pointed to Bessie May. Granger dug his foot in the plush carpet when Beauregard said the word assistant and pointed to Bessie May. "I'll be taking care of your baby today. You 3," and he nodded to the 3, "stay here and wait for me." It's a good thing the 3 were well practiced in holding their tongues around Beauregard because they were going to need it today. "Mr. Wienerman, you'll need someone to help you assist with baby," Mrs. Forrester said. "He is quite large. I'm afraid I've pampered him to excess." Beauregard puffed his chest. "No, ma'am. I am sorry for your loss, but I want you to know I'm fully capable of handling this by myself." He took the bassinet from Granger and marched upstairs with extreme dignity, if he did have to say so himself. He went into the second bedroom on the right. It really didn't look much like a nursery, what with a fireplace and a moose head over the fireplace, but these rich people were sometimes pretty weird. A large Leonberger therapy dog was asleep on a bear rug. He tried to nudge it with his foot to get it to move out of the way, but it didn't budge. He kicked it to awaken it. "It's out dead cold," he thought. There was no way he was going to move that dog. It must have weighed nearly 200 pounds. He didn't dare be too aggressive with the hound because he certainly didn't want to awaken it, and started howling. Mrs. Forrester didn't need to be upset any further, and that would definitely not be dignified. There was an adjacent sitting room. Perhaps that's where the baby bed was. If he could just negotiate the bassinet over this humongous pooch. He sidestepped the dog, carrying the bassinet as best as he could. Nothing but a small library. That dog was a pain in his backside as he tried to get out of the room. It just would not budge. Well, he thought, Mrs. Forrester was really upset. Maybe she said the wrong room. He checked out the first bedroom. Nothing. The bedroom across the hall. Nothing. The large sitting room down the hall. No. He even went to the master bedroom and the master bathroom. Poor Mrs. Forrester was obviously losing her mind with grief. Good thing he had his wits together for the both of them. There was nothing left to do except trudge down the stairs with the empty bassinet. "Mrs. Forrester, I am so sorry, but I couldn't find your baby upstairs. Only a sleeping dog in the second bedroom. I tried to nudge the dog with my boot, but I couldn't get the dang dog to move." "Mr. Wienerman, that's baby," she said forcefully. "He didn't move because he passed in the night." Beauregard's face flushed, and then he fluttered. He's baby? He passed in the night? That's your baby?" His eyes widened. His glass eye started to spin in its socket. Beads of sweat popped up on his forehead. The veins in his neck stuck out. Granger tried to cover his laugh with his hand, and he hissed, "He kicked the dead dog!" Bessie May stared daggers at Granger. I know, but he kicked the dead. He bit his tongue to keep quiet, but couldn't keep his shoulders from bouncing up and down until Marilyn kicked him swiftly in the chin. Ouch! What? Beauregard looked at Mrs. Forrester. I didn't know he was your baby. I didn't know he was dead, ma'am, or I wouldn't have kicked. I mean, I didn't kick him hard. I just tried to nudge him with my boot. Granger tried to keep from hissing, but it was impossible. Bessie May interrupted Beauregard's bumbling apology. "Granger and Mr. Wienerman, both of you go upstairs right now and remove Mrs. Forrester's baby with dignity. Is that understood?" Both answered in unison, yes, ma'am. Then she turned to Marilyn. "You accompany them, make sure baby is covered appropriately with a blanket, and make sure it's done right. Is that clear?" "Absolutely." There was no question who was in charge now. After they left to go upstairs, Bessie May assured Mrs. Forrester, "I guarantee that baby will be treated with utmost respect." Mrs. Forrester frowned. "I hope so. You'll handle both of those men appropriately?" "Oh, yes, indeed, Mrs. Forrester. I intend to mend both their fences." Both men struggled down the grand staircase in not nearly as grand a fashion as they had ascended it, and baby was covered by the blue baby blanket. By the time the men struggled to get baby to the hearse, Bessie May was as mad as a three-legged dog trying to bury his poo on an icy pond. She stopped to lecture both men. Marilyn was glad she wasn't part of the lecture. On the way back to Ash Grove, Bessie May called Fallon about the situation with baby. "What do you want us to do now, Fallon?" "Well, we're in a bind once again due to Beauregard. This family has money oozing out of every orifice. The family is known statewide. If I try to back out of the service, I'm afraid it will become a blot on the chain's name. Maybe Buford will handle this discreetly." "Yeah, there's a slight chance," Bessie May said. "Even a blind hog finds an acorn now and then." "Well, you three have done your part. You can return to Dallas. Buford can handle the rest, or Beauregard can handle the rest. He has me so rattled I don't know what his name is. I'll keep tabs on him from here." 2 days later, Bessie May, Marilyn, and Granger were called in again to Fallon's office. "I want you to go to Ash Grove this morning at 8:30 and assist with the funeral. There will be a brief viewing and then an interment at Evergreen Mausoleum." They nodded and started to leave. Oh, and there's one other little detail. And it's important all of you start and remain calm. It's for a dog. "A dog?" they said in unison. When Beauregard called, he already had the dog embalmed and casketed. Marilyn interrupted. "If you're going to call asked me to work a dog's funeral, I won't do. Fallon glared. I'm not finished. Sorry, she said. The family chose the Madagascar ebony casket. It retails for more than $40,000. Beauregard already has the dog on display. You two and Granger will assist with the funeral. There are going to be some important Texas dignitaries there, and yes, you will assist if you ever intend to work at this funeral home or any other. That's not dignified by any stretch of my imagination, Mary Lynn said. Bessie May was quick to change the subject. Does Beauregard have the dog at the family's home? No, he's in a stateroom at the Ash Grove Chapel, but Beauregard is expecting a huge turnout. Mary Lynn and Granger, you only have to follow Bessie May's lead. I'm not comfortable assisting in a funeral for an animal, Mary Lynn said. I don't pay you to be comfortable or uncomfortable. And if you ever want to be a funeral director, you will take the comfortable with the uncomfortable. Granger tried to smooth Mary Lynn's comment. I think what Mary Lynn is trying to say is this isn't really the reason we want to attend mortuary college. Perhaps your purpose might be to assist any grieving family, whether the loss is a family member or a pet, Fallon said. You're right, Fallon, Granger said. All grief is painful. And maybe your purpose should be in picking up a paycheck. Yes, sir, Granger agreed. Bessie May recognized that Fallon was on the brink of saying something that everyone would regret. We'll handle the service, Fallon. Go ahead, both of you. I'll get the details. They're about to step over the line, Fallon threatened. I'll talk to them, Bessie May said. They're young and inexperienced. They'll calm down. Bessie May picked up the family information and walked outside where Mary Lynn was stewing. Where's Granger? He had to run a death certificate. At least this time, Mary Lynn, Bessie May smiled. We won't be dealing with a stinking horse showering me with horse muffins like Triple C. Where's the pet cemetery? Bessie May skimmed the notes in the folder. Mary Lynn, the dog's not going to be buried in a pet cemetery. A cemetery for humans? Well, that's the last straw. Wait until you hear everything. The family owns stock in a mausoleum. Mary Lynn shook her head. Bessie May explained Fallon believes offending this family by refusing to do the funeral would affect the entire chain of mortuaries. There's going to be high-ranking state officials and even Nashville singers. What about affecting us? Mary Lynn pouted. Are you joking? If I were joking, Bess, I'd say a rabbi, a mortician, and a duck waddled into a mausoleum. Bessie May knew it was time to spread her wings and take charge of Mary Lynn. Look, sugar, we'll get through this together. It's important to separate our feelings from the job. Mary Lynn stuttered. It seems so... Bessie May cut her off. Unusual? Mary Lynn shook her head. Sacrilegious? Mary Lynn shook her head again. Crazy? Mary Lynn nodded. Well, there you have it. We both agree. We'll be razzed for working this harebrained service, Mary Lynn whined. Who cares what others think, Bessie May said, but I must admit, Beauregard has to slow down creating problems for us. He's keeping us as busy as a stump-tailed cow at fly time. Bessie May pulled the hearse onto the highway. Mary Lynn sulked. I want to be like Christ, but I'm not sure what model this dog service will be. There are all kinds of sorrow, Mary Lynn. Try to think about those who are hurting. After all, Bessie May grinned, the Bible never says Thou shalt not have a dog service. I don't want to talk about it, and I don't want a sermon. I said I'll do it, and I will. Bessie May turned on the radio. Mary Lynn didn't intend to close her eyes, but when she opened them, they were pulling up in front of the funeral home. She looked at Bessie May. Sorry, I lost my temper. Beauregard strolled out sporting a red carnation boutonniere. His face was glowing. People, bigwigs, are coming from all over to meet at the mausoleum. Yahoo, Mary Lynn said in a monotone. Beauregard ignored her and leaned into the window of the vehicle. The mourning family was here earlier to see their loved one. Go in and see my embalming expertise. Mary Lynn opened the front door of the mortuary. At the end of the viewing room, she could see the dog's glossy nose above the casket. Obviously, Beauregard had covered it with wax to make it look wet. Oh, dear Lord, this is embarrassing. How do I know if this dog looks good? Beauregard is a buffoon. Mary Lynn edged closer. The Leonberger's head was resting on a pillow. She mouthed to Granger, He crossed his paws. Turning to face the dog, no one saw her roll her eyes. It was a natural reflex. Granger closed the casket. A red rose casket piece splashed color over the entire casket. I'm glad that this'll be a closed casket service, at least, Mary Lynn muttered. You women drive the hearse to the mausoleum. Granger and I'll go ahead in the lead car. Beauregard turned to Bessie May. When you get there, open the casket for viewing. Mary Lynn opened her mouth. Bessie May whispered to Mary Lynn, Don't say a word, just get in the hearse. I'll drive. On the drive to the mausoleum, Mary Lynn picked up the box of printed materials. This whole thing is embarrassing. On the outside of the leaflet was a picture of the dog with the words, In loving memory, our baby, Leon Ladd, Fresco Hersey III. She paused and then exclaimed, There are honorary paw bearers. Bessie May gripped the steering wheel a little tighter. Put down the folder. It's important to concentrate on performing the best service possible for the family's sake. At the door, an usher directed them to the chapel. Bessie May opened up the casket and smoothed out the sides of the interior. Mary Lynn assumed Leon Ladd's collar was studded with real diamonds, although, truth be told, she wouldn't recognize a real diamond from a cubic zirconium. That money could have been spent better on animal shelters, not entombing a dead dog. Flowers packed the front of the chapel. Mary Lynn set up the memorial book but dropped the pen. Doggone it, she muttered. You might not want to utter that phrase twice, Granger grinned. The spacious chapel was standing room only. Beauregard escorted the grieving family to the first two reserved rows. It was his day in the sun, and he intended to make the most of it. Singers stepped to the front behind a microphone. I wonder what songs could be sung at a mutt's funeral, Mary Lynn whispered to Granger. Leon Ladd loved this song and used to bark along with it, the preacher said. Who Let the Dogs Out was sung by a quartet. A wave of laughter swept the audience from one side to the other. Mary Lynn scooted down in her chair, trying to make herself look as small as possible. She tuned out the eulogy, the scripture reading, and the sermon because she wanted all of this just to go away. I wonder why he believes he should preach an animal service. The minister began, I know it's unusual to hear a eulogy for a pet, but Leon was part of the Forrester family. I remember holding a service years ago for a stillborn. It was then that they learned that Leon would be their only living little one. He has been a special blessing to this family. Lydia has told me on more than one occasion that Baby, as they called him, saved her life. She was so mired down in despair that she had lost the will to go on. She didn't know what she would have been driven to without him. After the service, Bessie May ushered the congregation outside. Mary Lynn tried to stay in the shadows. Mrs. Forrester headed straight toward Mary Lynn. Mary Lynn evaded her eyes and tried to leave. "Excuse me, ma'am, could I have a minute?" Mary Lynn froze. "I know this is extraordinary, but my husband and I could never have any children after the loss of our infant. We wanted to, but I couldn't carry them to term. I know this must seem really strange to you, but Leon became our only baby. He really did save my life, as well as our marriage." Mary Lynn gulped. I'm sure he did. Our preacher was kind enough to step in and help us. It was important for us to commemorate what he meant to us. Thank you for your kindness. You've been such a blessing to us." Mary Lynn stared at the ground and just nodded. Beauregard followed the three to the hearse. "All of you were wonderful. This funeral was important to me." Bessie May's eyes softened. Beauregard stepped back, looked at the mausoleum, and said, "This pooch netted more than $50K. That ought to move me back to the city." Bessie May stared at him, hit the gas, and said, "Well, I swan." And just when I had sucked into Beauregard's tender side. I want you to know that this was based on a true story, and yes, there was a dog who was embalmed and placed in a casket and buried, and this dog was loved. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Until next time.